Okay, so we're describing the process of the meal offering. The Mishnah just told us that the part of the proceedings of the Saita is to bring a meal offering. That's the other part, that's the other element, besides for the water that she drinks. The Mishnah then compared it to the similarities and differences to all other meal offerings. And the Mishnah quoted a Mishnaic text which went through the details of the process of the meal offering. And yesterday we discussed how it's brought to the temple. Specifically, the Saita offering is brought to the temple in a wicker basket, in this Egyptian wicker basket, a kind of cheap basket that couldn't even become consecrated even if the person wanted to. Whereas ordinarily it's brought in silver and gold, which is the kind that if the person wanted to would be consecrated even though it's not. And then when they arrive to the temple with their meal offering, they put it then into a consecrated vessel. And this is the words of the Mishnaic text we quoted yesterday. And he gives it to, or places it within a consecrated vessel. And he consecrates it in the consecrated vessel. Now, the phrasing of the Mishnah seems to imply there's two stages. Number one, you put it into the consecrated vessel. And number two, you consecrate it in the consecrated vessel. As if to say, Shema Mismina, this seems to imply that Kli Sharis, the very fact that you put the meal offering into the consecrated vessel in the kachi, that itself does not make it consecrated. Elamidas, you have to have an additional action, or at least the knowledge, the intention that I'm putting it in here for the sake of consecrating it. It should be noted, as Rashi explains, that there are levels of consecration. Once a person decides they're going to bring a meal offering, then that meal offering, that flour, that stuff he's going to donate, is already consecrated. But the level of consecration there is what's called kedushas damim. That is to say, the value is consecrated. And therefore, if it became invalidated, you'd be responsible to pay out for a new one. But the actual item itself doesn't become holy. But once it goes into a consecrated vessel, it gets to a different level of holiness, in which the body itself is holy, not just the value, but the actual body. Thus, if it's been invalidated for whatever reason, then that has been completely lost out, right? Yeah. If before it's been consecrated in a consecrated vessel, even if I dedicated it, if it became invalidated, I can just redeem it and pay, because I've only consecrated the value, not the actual object. Once it's put into this holy vessel, it becomes consecrated in its very body, not just the value of it. But at any rate, the Mishnah here seems to imply there's two stages. Number one, you got to put it into the consecrated vessel. Number two, you have to have some sort of act, or at least intention, that I'm now consecrated on this higher level. And this doesn't seem to be the law. The law is the moment it touches the consecrated vessel, it becomes consecrated even without my intention. And therefore, says the Gemara, therefore we must say that the Mishnah is actually not describing two stages. Put it into the consecrated vessel and then consecrate it according to the consecrated vessel. That's not what it means. Rather, you should read it as you are placing it into the consecrated vessel so that it becomes consecrated, but not that it requires your actual intention. It's put into the consecrated vessel so that it becomes consecrated on that level, but not that you have to actually have any intention. Okay. Sorry?
It's one step.
It's one step and no intention required. Just by the very fact that it goes into the consecrated vessel, it already gets that elevated level of consecration in which the body of the actual property of the meal itself is consecrated, not just the value. And the next stage is V'noisin Allah Shamna V'levaynasa. He, that is the Jew who brought the offering, not the Kohen, he pours the oil, he puts the oil and the frankincense on it. Robert commented in the last class that frankincense is a kind of sap that's been crystallized, and that's indeed what the picture showed on Google. Okay, so he pours oil and the frankincense. Now this means that this part of the process is not the kohen. It's the person himself who brought it. So we need to bring a proof for this, because ordinarily all things that are happening in the temple or any services, most of them are done by the kohen. So we need to have a verse that tells us that it's actually the Jew who offered that does this process, pours the oil and the frankincense as opposed to the Kohen. So it says the Gemara Shenemar, as the verse reads, the verse first states, this is all the second chapter of the book of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus. But there reads, Shenemar, as the verse reads, Vayitzik Allah Hashemen, and he pours on top of it oil, referring to the person who brought the meal offering. The Nasan Lavoina, and he puts upon it the frankincense. And only afterwards, the next verse does it say you take it to the Kohen, implying that even before it's given to the Kohen, while it's in the temple, after it's been put into a consecrated vessel, the Jew then goes ahead and puts the oil and the frankincense. And this is indeed the next verse the Gemara quotes. The next stage is he brings it to the Kohen. The Ksiv, as the verse reads, in the next verse, Ve'viel b'nei Aaron, you give it to the sons of Aaron. So the verse implies that this is a very detailed step. He brings it in a silver and gold basket. He puts it into a consecrated vessel. At this point, it gets elevated in status. The body itself is now consecrated, not just the value. Then the person who brought it here, puts the oil in the flour, and then he hands it off to the Kohen. And then the Kohen maliche etzel mizbeach. The Kohen brings it to the mizbeach. Yeah. Sorry.
It's not stipulated if there's an exact amount.
There is. The verse gives us the exact measurements of how much oil, how much flour, and how much the ratio of flour and frankincense to oil. That the Torah does do.
So the Kohen takes that into consideration.
Sorry.
The Kohen trusts the guy who comes in with it.
Does the Kohen trust the guy who comes in with it? I assume that he that they have to measure it before. It's a good question. I don't know. So I'm just looking for something that I saw earlier. Okay, that comes later. The next stage is he gives it to the Kohen brings it to right. So he gives it to the Kohen, and then the Kohen brings it to the altar. The Ksiv, as the verse reads, the Mishnah said that after he hands it off to the Kohen brings it to the altar. The Ksiv, as the verse reads, all in the same chapters. The Yisha Eitzel Mizbeach, he brings it to the altar. So the Kohen brings it to the altar after the Jew put it into the consecrated vessel and then poured the flour, put the incense and the oil. Okay, now you have to go see. I want to stop over here because the next piece of the Gemara gets a little complicated. It's the exact diagram of the Mizbeach and where exactly it was brought, and different opinions to how it all went down. So I'm going to pull up a diagram for that tomorrow so we can follow along. Okay, wonderful day.
So if I was a Kohen and you were coming to me with that, you had the trust. But Joe Wolf from downstairs would come in.
No, I imagine the temple had a system of verifying. They had a system of checking these things and looking for these things, I assume. And I imagine also that you had to there were special markets from which you would buy all this flour and oil because it had to be of a certain quality. You couldn't just get it from IGA. You have to have a certain quality and the specifications are so detailed that you have to buy it from a certain specific place, which is probably under some sort of authority that, you buy today kosher food with a hechsher. So you have to buy a carbon with like a Kohen hechsher that indicates that this is flour valid for X. And you'd buy, let's say, okay, if I'm bringing this kind of offering, here's the measure prepared for that kind of offering. Here's the oil that fits the standard of both the amount and the type and the quality and so on. But with the hechsher, right? That's the same.
Same like with Passover stuff.
Exactly. And you trust the system, you trust the rabbis, right? Like the story of Hanukkah. They're looking for oil with the seal of the Kohen Gadol, right? So obviously they had the seals, they had these verification processes. Anyway, wonderful day.
She asked me if I was coming to show tonight.